Today I'm going to explore the question, why do some people react with such vitriol to Christian universalism, or even just the idea of Christian universalism? Because I do see this from time to time. By Christian universalism, as a reminder, I mean the conviction that in the end all things will be reconciled to God through Jesus Christ. In other words, no one's going to be lost, but every person in the whole of creation are brought into God's saving love, really by means of the purifying fires of judgment. And I want to be clear before I started on this. My focus is not on people who simply disagree with universalism because of like how they read basic key texts differently. Disagreement's normal, and many Christians can hold those debates respectfully. My question is, why the visceral, even angry kind of reaction? Why does this idea provoke such deep frustration and even hostility in some circles? Is the question. I'm not really gonna try to psychoanalyze individuals here. I am gonna be kind of speculating a little bit, but I've done this by talking to people who are universalists currently and have been a part of circles that are quite hostile to it. So I'm not just kind of pulling stuff out of my ass here. I'm exploring some possible reasons behind this kind of reaction of anger and vitriol. And I'll share 5 possible explanations for this. So reason 1, a sense of unfairness or futility. This first possible reason is the feeling that universalism makes one's own Christian identity or sacrifice during this life meaningless. Some think, if everyone is saved in the end, what was the point of all my devotion, all my discipline, all my prayer, all my faithfulness? This is similar to the way people sometimes respond to debates about like student loan cancellation. Those who worked hard to pay off, their loans often feel cheated if others suddenly receive forgiveness. The thought arises: was all that hard work pointless? And one commenter, on my recent community post about this topic, Anthony Nelson 6249, to give him a shout out, puts it in an even sharper and kind of self-interested way. Goes something like this: why behave well now and have faith in Jesus when I'm going to be saved in the end anyway? Now, this reaction exposes how deeply our moral imagination and moral formation is shaped by comparisons, merit, reward. Universalism seems to undermine this kind of spiritual calculus that many Christians have internalized. And instead, it says the rationale for following Jesus is not about gaining a future reward that other people don't have, or avoiding punishment that other people will get in the end. The rationale to respond is purely because it is true and beautiful, and because we love Jesus, full stop. With no external rationale needed to add anything more important than just that Jesus wants us to respond and to live in obedience. The only rationale is internal to that relationship that God establishes with us in Jesus. So reason 2 is what I'm calling Star Wars brain. Many of us have grown up with stories that divide the world neatly into good guys and bad guys, right? Think of Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, or any kind of superhero movie, really. Think Marvel here. These narratives create a deep emotional desire to be on the winning side of things and for the villains to lose in the end. So when universalism comes along and it suggests that even the bad guys are eventually going to be redeemed, it clashes with that kind of ingrained story structure that we just adopt. I talked about this with my video on hermeneutics and sort of scripts that we bring to a text. I think this is kind of one of those scripts that we tend to bring to a lot of different things. It's kind of dividing the world up into good people and bad people. So people feel kind of robbed of satisfaction, of judgment and vindication. Without clear winners or losers, the story seems less satisfying to some people. Now, this desire for a stark moral division is powerful. It's not just about theology, it's about the way that we've been trained to see the world. Universalism disrupts this kind of fantasy of ultimate triumph over one's enemies, since Christ has already died for our so-called enemies out of his abundant love and refuses to let go of them. God himself triumphs over real enemies like sin, death, flesh, powers, evil. Reason 3, I'm calling gated community brain. David Milley-Hart touches on this a bit in his book That All Shall Be Saved. But in many societies, as you know, belonging often comes with exclusion of others, right? Think of membership clubs, elite schools, or literal gated neighborhoods. The value of being inside is defined by who you keep out. Okay? Applied to theology, some Christians see salvation in similar terms. The church or the saved are the insiders, while others are the outsiders. Universalism, again, threatens this kind of system. It tears down those divisions, those fences. If everyone is ultimately in the end, then the distinction that gave insiders a sense of special identity just disappears at that point. For some, that's going to feel not just uncomfortable, but intolerable. Their religious belonging has been built on that contrast. We are the saved, they are the lost. And universalism removes the they in the end, and thus destabilizes the we. Okay. Reason 4, concerns about justice. This is a deeply moral one, right? Many react strongly because they fear that universalism is going to make light of real evil in the world. Imagine telling a survivor of abuse or genocide or systemic injustice that their oppressor will one day be reconciled to God. The worry is that this vision trivializes the suffering and denies the need for accountability. The anger here stems not from selfishness, but from a genuine concern for justice. And universalism seems to be like letting people off the hook, I guess, is the way that it's usually phrased. Of course, proponents of universalism often argue that reconciliation involves deep transformation, judgment, healing, not mere dismissal of evil, pushing it under the rug or something like that. In fact, salvation is only possible for the universalist through real painful judgment, accountability, and likely shame, where people are confronted with the gravity of what they've done in order to be moved to repentance as their flesh is destroyed and they've received a new transformed constitution beyond all that is evil and damaged by sin and death. Justice is mercy at the end of the day, as George MacDonald would put it, but it is still real justice. It's a justice defined by God's justice in person, which is Jesus himself. But this nuance can be hard to hear, and I understand that, especially when the emotional stakes are so high. The fear of injustice, I think, fuels this kind of backlash to universalism. Fifth and finally, some people react with vitriol out of fear of being wrong. Fear that if universalism is true, then much of what they've built their lives and faith upon could collapse. For Christians raised in traditions where eternal punishment is central, universalism feels like a threat to that whole structure, because it is. If you've preached it, taught it, and patterned your life around it, hearing that it might be false is destabilizing. It's easier to then attack that idea or the concept than to face the possibility that your framework could be flawed and needs to be adjusted or magnified in some way. This fear is existential. It's not just about the ideas. It's about identity, community, and security, really. Losing eternal hell or annihilation can feel like losing the ground beneath your feet. So, conclusion, why the vitriol? It seems like it has something to do with a sense of unfairness or futility. Star Wars brain, craving for good guys versus bad guys. Gated community brain, belonging through exclusion, concerns about justice and evil. And then finally, fear of being wrong and losing one's own framework. Each of these reveals something deeper about how people imagine faith, morality, and community. I'll close with this thought, and I'm mostly talking to myself here because I struggle with this a lot. When we encounter hostility to Christian universalism, maybe the best response, at least initially, is not counter-argument, but compassion. Behind the vitriol are likely real fears, real concerns, and deeply ingrained stories that you can't just kind of give up in a couple of minutes online. If we can listen patiently and even engage graciously, we might model the very reconciliation we believe awaits all of creation. And with that, this has been Apocalypse here. Christianity you can live with.